Hey guys, welcome back to the 8th class of chapter 1. Today in this class we'll be discussing the types of economies in the world. Alright? By this time, we've only been discussing how a free market works. But what exactly is a free market? When was it invented? Are there other types of economies as well? I'm pretty sure you guys know about conflicting economic ideologies, that of capitalism, communism, and essentially the wider free market school of thought or the socialist school of thought. We will be discussing exactly that in this class. And we will also be discussing, is there a middle ground between these two very, very different economic ideologies? Without any further ado, let's jump right to it. All right. What have we been discussing so far? It is the free market economy. All right. Now, the father of economics, Adam Smith, postulated the free market economy. He wrote for it. He was completely for capitalism when he wrote his book, An Inquiry into the Wealth of Nations. All right. And what essentially does the free market economy entail? All right. It postulates the free market economy believes that private businesses and households should and can own and control the resources. All right. The factor of production should be in the hands of private businesses and households, and they should be free to do whatever they want with it. So the factors of production of land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship are controlled by private businesses, firms, and households to do whatever they want with it. They own and control those resources. Okay? And there is absolutely no place for the government in the realm of economics. The government should not intervene, and if it does, it should keep its intervention to the most minimal amount it can. All right? The government can have no intervention in the market or have any say in the economic decisions. Okay? So essentially, private players like firms and households should control resources while the government should just stay out of economic undertakings. But fun thing, all right? Adam Smith never mentioned that the government has no place to participate in the economy. The government has a vital place in the free market economy to, help the economy. The government should look after law and order. The government should provide education. The government should also focus on the welfare of its citizens. But it should leave the economic decision making, essentially the market, to readjust on its own. There can be no government intervention in the market, and private businesses and individuals should operate by themselves. Okay? And why should private businesses and households operate? Because they want to make a profit. Free players should be able to make profit. Private businesses can sell to consumers for profit, and consumers can buy from private businesses to maximize their utility. Right? Everybody wins. The market forces of demand and supply determine what to produce, the prices of those products, as well as the allocation of resources. Essentially, what people want, the firm produces. Okay? If the people of a free market economy want more cars instead of more houses, the firms will stick to producing more cars. They will reallocate resources to the production of cars rather than houses. And the demand for the good being produced will determine the price, and the consumers will determine what is produced and what is supplied. Okay? The free market economy is more efficient. Why? Because everyone knows what they want, and what you want is what is being produced. So there is minimal wastage of resources. However, it is less equitable. Not everyone gets what they want. People who can pay for it get what they want. This is what we learned in the very beginning, that there are finite resources and only those who can pay for products get those products. So this is the free market economy in a nutshell. Now, there is another widely different type of economy known as the command economy, or the communist or socialist economy. All right? The father of communism, all right, or Marxism, as you would maybe know it, was Karl Marx, he was a German philosopher who later moved into economics, right? He was very concerned that capitalism or free market economics was harmful to the people, right? So he came up with this idea known as communism, where the government owns and controls the resources instead of the people. Okay, the government decides what to do with the resources on behalf of the people because the government knows better, right? The government makes production plans and decides what to do with those resources. The government decides what economy, all right, they will operate as and what the economy will produce. Essentially, they decide what output is produced, right? If the people want cars, the government maybe decides that no, cars are not what is needed right now, more buildings are, right? So the government decides and dictates what is produced, right? And there is strictly no selling for profit in a command economy, right? The government is the only seller who is concerned with the benefit of the people. Profit, Marx argued, leads to greed, all right? Or rather, greed leads to profit. And greed is never good because it leads to some people getting more and others getting less. Now we see that the market forces are not allowed to operate together, right? The market forces are definitely taken into account by the government, but the government makes all ultimate economic decisions. We see that the government produces output and the government owns and controls resources, and both there is no firm over here. Why? Because there is no need for firms to exist. The government produces everything, and households essentially supply factors of production to the government. The government pays them, and they buy, and households buy products from the government, and households give money or income to the government. So there are only two players, the households and the governments. This entire economic system is definitely a lot less efficient. Why? Because the government is a human entity. It does not know what it wants. Maybe the information it possesses is outdated. Thus, it's less efficient. However, it's more equitable. Everyone gets the same thing. No, everyone's needs are met, and there is no asymmetry in the distribution of income and output. All right? But we would see in this world that there are very few examples of true capitalist or completely communist economies. All right? Even China is an economy which embodies both communist and capitalist ideologies. China has a stock market. All right? There are Chinese businesses which sell for profit. And even in the most free of markets like America, we see that the government has a definite say into the economic undertakings of the United States. So, what is this? Before we get into that, essentially, there are demerits. And because of these demerits, the economies try to readjust and reevaluate their positions. The free market economy has various disadvantages, right? The overproduction of demerit goods, such as alcohol, because of its high demand, underproduction of merit goods because of its profits, all right? And because there's no regulation, the government has no say, there will be complete breakdown of social order, right? Too much production of negative demerit goods, goods which cause harm, and the underproduction of education, healthcare, things which people need. Now, there is larger inequality associated with free market economies. We see that poverty, all right, is there. Definitely people who don't get as much as the higher income earners, right? There is larger inequality and there is less equity in resource division, right? There are also risks, right, to the environment when capitalism is implemented, because capitalism is concerned with the rapid production of goods and services for the purpose of profit. So, increased and rapid use of resources leads to environmental degradation. More trees are cut down to create tables, more lakes are dammed to meet and create dams to produce electricity. It leads to the environment being damaged on a very large scale. Another risk is because markets essentially operate to provide goods and services to the consumers. Sometimes they can, transform into monopolies, which is a single seller, which is the exact opposite of an economy. When a company gets too large, when a company is the only firm which produces a certain good or service, that's when it becomes a monopoly or oligopoly, when there are very few firms which produce something, as opposed to the large amount of firms which give choice to the consumer. Now, societies over here become at risk of becoming abandoned because they cannot take care of themselves, right? Because there's a rapid use of resources, there is inequality, there are monopolies which are unfair to the people. Society has a very large risk of imploding. That's all the disadvantages of a free market economy. But the command economy has disadvantages as well. Shared poverty is a common phenomenon. We see that communist countries like North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, or rather socialist countries, countries which believe in the Marxist view of government, all right, they are poorer than free market countries. Free market countries also have poverty, but the overwhelming majority of people in command economies live in poverty. There is also corruption. Remember that the government is a human entity, and humans can always be greedy. This can lead to corruption happening, bribery. If you look at case studies in the USSR, people had to pay large amounts of bribes just to get normal things done, like electricity to their houses or get a car. There is also the problem of inefficiency. The government may be able to take some decisions, but they take time and they're slow. They're not as responsive as the market forces of supply and demand, right? So essentially, there's inefficiency. There is no profit. So what are people going to do? There is no incentive, okay? There's no incentive to innovate. There's no incentive to work harder because everyone is going to have the same amount of income at the end of the day, right? So if you're a producer and you are guaranteed payment, like you will be paid no matter what, you will simply produce whatever you're producing and there will be no reason for you to work harder. Thus, your products may be of inferior quality. That is another problem with the command economy. The possibility of the government abusing the power over here as well is very large. We see that governments are autocratic. They sometimes don't take into account the good of the people, and government officials, they essentially abuse their control of resources. And also another thing can be unpopular planning. The government may prioritize the production of certain goods and services which it thinks it's needed. However, the people may want something else. The government may think that wheat is necessary to be produced, but people simply want more jobs or more education, more healthcare. But the government may just want to produce wheat because maybe it's a cash crop. So unpopular planning may lead to revolts, and thus we see that both the free market economy and the command economy has disadvantages. And this brings us back to the point I was talking about earlier. Is there a middle ground? Because both economies have disadvantages which are too great to take into account. And we see that to get rid of these disadvantages, countries in the real world operate in the middle ground. And what is this middle ground? Where there is both government intervention and private ownership of resources. What is it? It's the third option known as mixed economies. It takes the best of both economy types and leaves the worst. So essentially in a mixed economy, India is an example of a mixed economy. India produces cars, it produces shirts, it produces soda. There is private ownership of resources, and essentially firms and households are free to do whatever they want with the resources that they control. However, when the government thinks that it's time to intervene, the government does. The government provides education, such as government schools. The government provides healthcare for those in need, government hospitals. The government creates infrastructure. So essentially, the mixed economy is the best option because the advantages of both systems, from capitalism, there is efficiency, from command, there is equity, and there are almost none of the disadvantages as well. Why? Because both of them are countermanded. There is government intervention to take care of the free market problem, and there is private ownership to take care of the inefficiency problem of the command economies, right? Now, as I said before, you can take the example of any country in the world, the United States, Canada, Mexico. They're all mixed economies. Say for some, right? Like North Korea. North Korea is totalitarian and it's communist, right? But most countries are mixed economies. They may lean more to capitalism or they may lean more to perhaps communism, but they are mixed economies because they have elements of both. Having purely a command economy or a capitalist economy is very rare in this world. The freest market in the world is widely viewed as Hong Kong. Hong Kong has the least regulations on selling and buying, and the most closed market can be considered the former USSR. All right? The pure ideologies of command economies and capitalist economies are very rare and very difficult to implement. So that is essentially it. There are three types. All right? Command economy, which is the communist economy thought of by Karl Marx. All right? This is where the government owns and controls resources. The second type of economy is the free market economy, the capitalist economy thought of by Adam Smith. And there is the third type of economy known as the mixed economy, which is, again, a mixture of the free market and command economy combined to ensure that all the economic agents get the advantages of both and the disadvantages of none. I hope this lesson was informative and you have a better understanding as to the different type of economic theories that different countries run on. We will be discussing this economic theory a lot more in depth in chapter 2, where we discuss economic theory and the evolution of essentially economic thought and how different people and different schools of thought have evolved from different scenarios in the world. So essentially, we will be discussing this topic in a lot more depth in chapter 2. So essentially, until the next class, good night, sleep well, and don't forget to stay safe.